Grüß, willkommen in einem and in our Fragrance video. Welcome to another exciting video, in this case episode 14 of my Wargaming Rules Review series of videos. In this video I'll provide an overview of the Lightning War Red Storm Micro Armor Figure Gaming Rules, written by Andrew Stevenson between 2008 and 2013. Well, I have to admit, Schwerpunkt was first made available in 2007, so it's probably the first pure company scale set of rules. That is, one element is a company. But LWRS came out the following year, and by 2013 was far more complete than any other set of rules in the same scale. It was not until Panzerkorps was published that there existed another set of rules which matched LWRS in terms of the element scale. I also have to note I did convert Corps Commander into a true company scale set of rules called Neu Divisional Commander, but in terms of mature, well-tested and complete set of rules, the only game in town was, or is today, LWRS and Panzerkorps. The objective in this video is to allow potential players to determine if these rules are suitable for them by looking at the basic elements of the rules. The most important aspect of any rules is its scale, as this affects a host of other factors, such as what type of game you would expect, what amount of movement, and to a lesser extent, the force mixes you require. The next factor that I normally look at is the game system, such as sequence of play, visibility, movement, and fire combat systems. This will tell you how historically accurate or otherwise a set of rules is. In the long run, the most important is gameplay, and that tells us how easy or difficult playing a game is. This requires play testing, as it cannot be derived from just reading the rules. This tells you how playable the rules will be in the long term. Other factors such as learning the rules are important, and learning the rules is a combination of complexity, rules presentation, and examples. Simple game systems can be difficult to learn, and complex game systems can be easy to learn. So while affected by the complexity of the rules themselves, other factors do come into play and need to be considered. The final factor to consider is supporting material, which is required for players to create force mixes, set up a game, and play the game. Many free rules may be really good, but if they lack cheat sheets, equipment lists, army lists, and scenarios, players will need to be able to create them themselves, and quite frankly, most simply don't bother. Based on my research, I think the first version of Lightning War was made available on the internet in 2008, and I think it only covered World War II. Written by Andrew Stevenson and available as free rules, this was an example where a free set of rules actually gained real traction. By 2013, Lightning War Red Storm was made available, which allowed for modern conflicts as well. They were very popular in the UK and I think New Zealand, and allowed for quick and playable games. The only issue was a lack of supporting materials such as army lists, equipment lists, and scenarios. Some effort was made in the UK to actually provide this. When I first discovered the rules, I decided to reformat them, call it Bevegungskrieg, and posted it on the IO group site, as well as posting a large body of supporting material on the same site, including extensive scenarios. The rules used company-sized elements, each consisting of 3 steps or strength points. The elements formed battalions, and the basic combat unit was the battalion. The combat system used a simple lots of d6 dice combat mechanism, and the sequence of play was an initiative-based movement phase followed by a fire phase. There was nothing revolutionary, but the package worked extremely well. LWRS uses an element scale of a company, which allows a player to command a division. A player should have no more than 50 elements, so 4 companies per battalion and 4 battalions per regiment gives you 2 regiments with attached formations, or 3 smaller regiments. The ground scale in LWRS for World War II is 1 centimetre equals 100 metres, which is 1 in 10,000 scale, for 6mm figures. In 1960 or after 1960, the scale changes to 1 centimetre equals 200 metres, which is 1 in 20,000 scale for 6mm figures. There is no scales for 15mm figures, but a reasonable option is 1 inch equals 100 metres, or a scale of 1 in 3937 for World War II, and a scale of 1 in 7874 for moderns. As each player would possess about 30 frontline elements of 2 to 3 centimetre width, it can cover a frontage of 60 centimetres to 90 centimetres. So 90 centimetres is an optimal minimum width for a playing area. The depth depends on the scenario. This assumes any scenario being played will complete within a day. Larger games are possible if you decide for multi-day games. Each game turn represents about 120 minutes. A typical game would last no more than 12 game turns, so 24-hour game hours, that is, can be gamed. In practice, a 4-hour game can easily cover a game day, which is 6 to 8 game turns, and a full day of gaming can cover 2 game days. This is because night game turns represent 240 minutes. The latter makes for a rather long game, but is very possible. This opens up a wide range of tactical situations, which is unusual for micro armor figure gaming rules. A front line can be broken through in about 4 to 6 hours of fighting, so in theory a game consists of the preliminary preparation, the breakthrough attack, and a roll-up or deep advance, followed by the opposing player counter-attacking. For 6mm figures, a depth of 120 centimetres or 4 feet playing area is recommended, as it gives each side a 30 centimetre player zone and allows for advances up to 60 centimetres. A meeting engagement would not need this depth, perhaps 3 feet maximum. The sequence of play structure looks rather complex, but is actually rather simple. Most of the complexity is due to giving comparatively minor functions their own phase, such as phase 1 to phase 3, which could have been combined into a single phase, as could have phase 8 and 9. The final piece of complexity is due to the way close combat is conducted, such as phase 6. If we peel away this level of complexity, the game system is a both-player move followed by a single simultaneous combat phase sequence of play. The most complex phases are movement, which involve an alternate movement by regiment based on initiative, and the combat phase, which can involve a complex interaction of fire combat and close combat. Command is important in these rules, but is covered in a rather simple manner. Elements, or battalions, outside command radius, which is 15 centimetres for regimental HQ and 30 centimetres for divisional commanders, have a reduced quality. In addition, the divisional commander has a special capability which requires it to be within 30 centimetres of a battalion. This is a wonderfully simple way of dealing with command without loading down players with a mass of rules. I must point out, in the rules, battalions are described as combat units and regiments as battle groups. To make it more understandable to those who are not familiar, I'll use battalion, regiments and divisions instead of combat units and battle groups. Supply is surprisingly important, and yet is covered in also a surprisingly simple manner. For indirect fire weapons, supply is a major factor, with each player starting the game with a number of supply points, which can be expended whenever artillery fires or a battalion conducts a second move. Once supply is expended, artillery cannot conduct indirect fire and battalions cannot conduct a second movement, or if they try and fail, they are fatigued. It's a bit unclear, this latter point, but I do suspect this is the case. Airdropped elements need to consider small arms supply until a line of supply is opened up. For victory points purposes only, I've included optional rules for lines of supply, which affects control of a playing area, but this is purely victory points purposes only and nothing to do with the actual game mechanics. The rules do include the concept of orders, but they call them stances. Each battalion can adopt one of 3 stances, or orders: attack, defend, and maneuver. Attack forces movement forward towards an enemy, or fire combat against an enemy. Elements cannot take cover or adopt any form of travel movement. Defend allows a battalion to take cover, and it can attack if retaking a position which it's lost, but otherwise a battalion cannot move towards the enemy. Maneuver allows a battalion to move much faster. It represents a travel mode or column formation and triple movement. It's assumed such battalions cannot move towards a visible enemy, nor may it take cover. Changing stance or orders requires a successful quality test. Artillery support or indirect fire support occurs during the support phase, which initially seemed odd but is actually rather cunning. Players use artillery fire to attempt to disorder an enemy battalion, which in turn is being close assaulted. Most indirect fire elements will be off the playing area and will be dedicated or part of the battalion, direct or part of the regiment, or general or part of the division. Dedicated artillery can automatically conduct indirect fire, but direct and general requires a quality test for this to occur. On the other hand, general artillery is available to any battalion, and direct is available to any battalion in the same regiment. This is a very cunning way of including indirect fire support with minimal rules. I actually consider it rather brilliant. Aircraft serves a similar purpose to artillery, disordering enemy battalions under close assault. The aircraft rules are similarly complete and simple, as well as even offering end-to-end combat, which only Corps Commander does to my knowledge. Each player has a number of aircraft of different types. Level and carpet bombers are specialty aircraft which are used before the game and rarely ever used. Observation, which is useful, is also rarely ever used. Each player first places all ground support aircraft on the playing area. Once placed, a quality test is conducted. If it fails, it's assumed to have not arrived and can be used the following game turn. Then each player places cap aircraft against enemy aircraft, conducts a quality test, and this determines and will remain if it passes. Finally, each player can place cap against enemy cap. The quality tests are conducted and the result is the number of enemy aircraft facing each other. Air-to-air combat is a simple soaking off system. Cap facing cap results in both aircraft being removed. Then any remaining cap facing other aircraft result in both aircraft being removed, and remaining aircraft can now conduct air-to-ground combat. This, like artillery, is very simple and provides a very detailed result. In Bewegunskrieg, I've added a number of optional rules to reflect aircraft usage and type for those players who wish a bit more realism, but is generally not required for a game. Anti-aircraft is also covered in a rather simple manner. Any aircraft inflicting hits can be saved if the affected element is within range of a friendly anti-aircraft weapon. I originally did not like this system, but in retrospect I feel this is a very good simple system and makes anti-aircraft fire incredibly simple. The visibility rules are equally simple, if very basic. They work, but do not reflect the effects of movement or being in cover. They work and work well, but their very simplicity may annoy some purist. The initiative rules determines movement order, and in that are rather standard. Each commander, of which there are normally 3 or 4, determines their individual initiative values. When movement occurs, the commander with the highest value is asked if it wishes to move. If it skips, the next highest value is determined, and so on. Once a commander and its subordinate elements have moved, it may no longer move in that game turn. Originally, the wording of the rules caused me great confusion, but this system is common for a number of rules, and I suppose a lot of assumptions were made accordingly in order for it to work accurately. After a significant amount of effort, I finally fully understand the initiative and movement order system, and I think it works rather well. However, from personal experience and in the type of scenarios I normally play, it has minimal effect. The rules possess a quality or morale system, which all elements having a quality, or where all elements have a quality of between 1 and 5, with higher values quality able to pass a quality test easier. Quality is a mix of morale, equipment and doctrine. I must admit I like it. It's simple and provides sufficient flavour to the troops, although from experience 80% of the troops end up having a quality of 3 in most of my games. Quality needs testing when battalions need to do something, such as change stance, call down artillery, call down aircraft support or laying minefields. The rules are very simple and they work very well indeed. The rules have the concept of actions, or use the concept of actions, of which a battalion can conduct 2 in most cases in a given movement phase. An action can be used to rally, deploy, that is take cover, or move. All battalions can conduct 1 action, but a second action requires passing a quality test, which could also result in a supply point being expended, or if none are present, the battalion becomes fatigued. Once again, simple and combined with quality gives high quality troops a real advantage over low quality troops without loading down players with masses of morale rules. The movement system is very simple, with battalions moving in most cases 6 centimetres to 10 centimetres. The terrain is also rather simple, with only bad and good going terrain being present. The rules uses a simple fire combat system with players, which require players to first determine the number of dice to use, and once spun, with a 4 or greater resulting in a hit. While indirect fire can be used to inflict casualties, that is not its main purpose. Its main purpose is to disorder an enemy battalion, which in turn is being close assaulted. Inflicting 2 hits will achieve this. Indirect fire occurs in its own phase, and while there is no concept of area fire, interdiction fire, or fire support, only indirect fire, the effects of these types of fire can be reflected using this, or the effects of all these types of fire can be used using this rather simple system. Artillery can conduct counter-battery fire, which I must admit is very rare but possible. Once hits are achieved, the defending player now attempts a save die roll, which requires that player to cross-reference some modifiers, applying them and spinning a d6 for each hit. The primary modifiers are deployed and entrenched. If a hit is not saved, that battalion suffers 1 casualty. Once 3 casualties are achieved, an element is removed. If enough elements are removed, the battalion becomes fatigued and then exhausted, which means it's only good for defence. Direct fire is very simple. If you can see a target, you can fire at it, which is a reasonably simple manner of dealing with fire ranges. You can also fire through friendly elements. I am assuming you may be able to fire through enemy elements as well, although the visibility ranges of 6 cm for infantry and guns and 10 cm for vehicles, there may not be much opportunity for that to occur. At this scale, lining up and firing at each other until one side runs away is not what you're supposed to do if you want to win a game, and the rules don't encourage that behaviour. Anti-tank weapons firing at armour need to consider something called grade, of which there are 4, ranging from light, medium, heavy to extreme. An extreme anti-tank weapon firing at a light armoured target is going to get a lot of dice, and when the opposite occurs, they'll get very few dice. The grades are relative, so the grade of a tank may alter over the years, with a Panzer IV being medium in 1941 but light in 1943, for example. All combat is based on determining fire points, which means how many dice you get to spin. The basic system is infantry get 1, tanks and anti-tank weapons 2, and artillery 3. There are a number of basic modifiers which in most cases are not used in a game until you make a major error. This is nice and simple, but there are a host of exceptions and special situations which can be hard to keep track of. It's the reason why I've created a reformatted version of the rules, to try and place all these special cases into a single table so I don't forget them during a game. I created this table as a result, and I have to admit, while I'm not really super happy with the table, this is my attempt to place everything you need in a single table. In this case, only dealing with direct fire and not close combat, which has its own table. Nonetheless, in most cases, the special cases are not used, and as long as you remember the standard values, you can normally deal with most situations. The key to the game is close assault or close combat, and the special rules vary somewhat when engaging in this type of combat, with this chart showing those particular values. The game is all about close combat. An attacker has to line up all the various tools at his control, such as aircraft, artillery and supporting fire support, to hit the defender's line in a close assault with the objective of punching through. Eventually, losses in support will cause your attack to fade, but until that occurs, it's all about taking ground. Of course, I have to admit, this only occurs if you're playing a scenario. In a standard game, and with the standard victory conditions, we typically end up with the old cautious gameplay which results in almost nothing happening, which can often occur with any set of rules. Thus, it's critical when you have a game, there is a reason for it, otherwise your game will be rather boring. Scenarios are important. The rules format is very basic and simple. It has minimal cross-referencing and minimal diagrams and bling. For homegrown rules, they are reasonable and aim to be as simple and short as possible to allow for use as a reference document during play. There is a quick reference sheet, which is simple but rather good. While not professional, the rules are more than functional and usable, but the lack of cross-referencing is a bit of an issue if you're learning the rules. It's sometimes hard to find that all-important special rules which you know should apply in this situation, and you need to get the detail in order to apply it correctly. One reason why I did create a reformatted version was these minor issues, but once experienced, players can easily play the game using nothing more than the original rules and quick reference sheet. In my reformatted version, I've added a case system and as much cross-referencing as possible. Another issue was the lack of a simple summary table to assist for quick referencing, which can be seen here. In red, we see the 5 points and all the modifiers in a simple table. There are some optional rules, but these are not required for play, and I often do not use them myself, even though I created them in my reformatted rules. Most are simply designed to add some small element of bling or realism to what is otherwise a very good game system. There are, unfortunately, a reasonably large number of special rules, such as anti-tank weapons with no HE against soft targets, anti-tank weapons with effective HE against soft targets, anti-tank guided weapons against armour being some. They are not over the top, but sometimes it's hard to remember them all. I have found most can be placed into a chart, as you can see here, thus reducing the issue of forgetting special rules. Once again, this has been done, the special rules are more than manageable. What I do find surprising is these rules do require strength point markers. Each element has 3 strength points, and this needs to be tracked. I have to admit, unlike Corps Commander, it's not a major issue, and as long as you only keep track of SPs by battalion, with an average of 12 battalions, it's not a major headache. I feel this is a reasonable compromise. But in my age, I'm really beginning to dislike strength points and strength point markers, so I may be more sensitive to them than most players are. The basic sequence of play is simple, but the structure is not optimal. I would have combined the first 3 phases into a single pre-phase, possibly called initiative phase, and combined the last 2 phases into a single phase. But this is only a minor gripe. The sequence of play is more than adequate, but I think it could be simplified. This set of rules will not hurt your head, apart from some minor calculating when different grades are involved with each other. There is no need to be able to do long division in your head. This is a major plus. The one possible issue is the number of dice. This is a dice game where a typical combat could involve a handful of d6 dice. I don't consider this an issue, and I actually rather like it, but some people may not. The only good thing about the handful of dice is there's no combat results table to reference. I find this a big plus. The basic set of LWRS rules does not contain much in the way of army lists, which is typical for homegrown rules, but is a major issue. I've created a large number of army lists in the Überprüfung IO group site, but as we'll see, if you have scenarios, you probably don't need army lists. So create your scenarios. Displayed here is an army list, in this case the German 45th Infantry Division in March 1942. Because of strength points, some effort needs to be made to convert this into elements on the playing area, but is certainly possible. The rule supplements do contain some equipment information, which has been created by a player in the UK. These are basic but perfectly adequate. I've created extensive equipment lists, but once again scenarios preclude any requirement for this. A key factor for any rules is scenarios, and players have created a number of good scenarios for other players to use. These can be downloaded from the LWRS IO group site. In addition, I've created a series of scenario PDFs, one for each year of World War II and one for each decade of the Cold War. As with all my scenarios, I graphically depict the force mixes for ease of setup. In conclusion, these rules are surprisingly good. The rules cover a wide range of aspects of modern warfare, from World War I style mass infantry attacks to ELAN aircraft. The only set of rules which covers so much in a single set of rules that I'm aware of would be Corps Commander, which I find astounding. The rules format makes it a bit difficult to learn the rules, but I've created many videos and example PDF files to assist with this. Regardless, this is a common issue with any set of rules, and it's certainly not a negative. The rules themselves play very well. They are simple, easy to play, and surprisingly nuanced. If you are super interested in vehicle detail and specs, you may not be happy with these rules. If you're mainly focused on realism, you will also probably not be too happy with the rules. But if you're interested in a good, fun game which can be played in a day, these rules are optimal. So good, they are generally my main set of rules that I play these days, although I'm rapidly moving towards a board game conversion at the present moment. But nonetheless, these are definitely a go-to set of rules that I play, along with Spearhead at a different scale. I've created 3 sets of reformatted rules. The first, version 1, is only reformatted with no optional rules or changes. These are identical to the original LWRS. Version 2 includes optional rules such as terrain, weather, setup, or other rules which fill gaps in the original rules. This version of the rules includes additional diagrams, figures, and commentary. The original rules are unchanged, but additional rules have been added to fill any gaps. For each of the versions, there are 3 formats of the rules: 1, 2, and 3 column formats. The closest comparison to these rules is Panzerkorps, or a company scale version of possibly Corps Commander, which is not really a robust or complete play-tested version of a set of rules, so probably I shouldn't really even include it. The official website for LWRS is on IO Group, and the author of the rules is the moderator and is available to answer any questions you have. The rules are all free and can be downloaded from these sites. If you want to use the reformatted version, that's on the Bevergunskrieg IO Group site. And so we come to an end of my episode 14 of my video series on game rules. In this case, a specific analysis of the LWRS Micro Armor figure gaming rules. Alle guten Dinge, kommen zu einem Ende.